Okay, trig equations, unit 8, day 7. This is the last thing for this unit, so we are testing like in 2 class periods. So just make sure you're aware of that, and if you need to come and get help during charger time or whenever, you need to come in. Okay, let's just get going on this. So, oh my gosh, come on. A trig equation can have several solutions depending on the defined interval. To solve a trig equation, you must isolate the trigonomic function. So you must isolate like the sine or the cosine or whatever it may be. And then watch out, that's supposed to say watch out for extraneous solutions. Okay? And let's just get into solving some of these suckers, maybe. Okay, so you're given 6 sine of theta minus 3 equals 0, and it's on the interval from 0 to 360. So we're going to use the whole unit circle for this. We're going to use the unit circle a ton this lesson, okay? So first I'm going to solve this for sine of theta. So I'm going to add the 3 over. So I get 6 sine of theta equals 3. Divide by 6. So I get sine of theta equals 3 over 6, which reduces to 1/2. So sine of theta equals 1/2. So I need to look at the unit circle, and if you don't have this memorized, then you're going to have to write this on your note card or something. If you have it memorized, awesome. This will probably be a little bit easier for you. So sine is your y value. So I'm going to go look at this unit circle. See, where does my y equal 1/2? Well, it equals it right there at 30 degrees. And then again at 150 degrees. And it's not at 210 because that's negative 1/2. And it's not at 330 because that's also negative. So my answer here is theta equals 30 and 150 degrees. And then you're done. You solved for theta. Okay, let's do this next one. So you have 4 cosine of theta plus 5 equals 0. Wait, why did I write that weird? Solve for cosine. Oh, I don't think that equals 0. This isn't supposed to be there. Whoops. So 4 equals cosine of theta plus 5. And then just ignore that equals 0. Sorry, that confused me. Okay, so we have 4 cosine of theta plus 5. Subtract that 5 over and you get negative 1 equals cosine of theta. Again, we're just going to look at the unit circle. See where on this unit circle does my x equal negative 1 because cosine is your x value. That's at 180 degrees, so theta equals 180. Okay? Let's do another one. So you have negative 2 tangent of theta equals 2 square root of 3. And this time it's from 180 to 360. So we're just using the bottom half of the circle now. So first we're going to solve for tangent of theta. And I'm going to divide by negative 2. So I get tangent of theta equals negative square root of 3. I'm going to look at my unit circle. And tangent is y over x. So I need to see, where does this equal negative square root of 3 if I divide the y by the x value? What's happening? So at 300 degrees, if you take the y divided by the x, you get negative square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. And let's just go through that math right now to make sure that actually works. So if you divide that, whoops, come on. If you actually write that out, those 2's cancel because there's a 2 on top and a 2 on bottom, so they cancel. You get negative square root of 3 over 1, which equals negative square root of 3. So theta equals 300 degrees. Okay? And we're not going to do it in any other quadrants because we're only working with the bottom 2. And tangent's positive in the 3rd quadrant, so it's not even going to work there because it has to be negative square root of 3. Okay? Now let's look at this one. So we have 5 cosine of theta plus the square root of 2 equals 3 cosine of theta. We need to isolate the cosine of theta. So I'm going to get all my cosines to one side and everything else to the other side. So I'm going to subtract the 3 cosine of theta and I'm going to subtract the square root of 2. And you get 2 cosine of theta equals negative square root of 2. Divide by 2. And you get negative square root of 2 over 2. Then I just need to see where that equals negative square root of 2 over 2. Where x equals negative square root of 2 over 2. And this is from 0 to 270, so this is just the first three quadrants. Not in the first. The second, we have it at 135, and then the third at 225. So theta equals 135 and 225. Cool? We're going to save those next two for class. Then let's go look at this one. So these ones we're solving by factoring. So we have to use like our factoring rules here. So if we have sine squared of theta plus sine of theta, those both have a sine in common. So I'm going to divide both of them by sine. When you do that, you pull out that sine of theta. Sine squared divided by sine is sine. Sine divided by sine is 1. So you get sine of theta, parentheses, sine of theta plus 1 equals 0. Then set the outside equal to 0, so you get sine of theta equals 0. And then sine plus 1 equals 0. Subtract the 1 over, so you get sine of theta equals negative 1. And again, we're just going to look at the unit circle, and let's look and see where it equals 0. Well, sine equals 0 at 0 and 360 degrees, and also at 180 degrees. So that's for that first, for the sine of theta equals 0. Then we also have sine of theta equals negative 1, and that's at 270. So theta also equals 270. Then if we write that all together, theta equals 0, 180, 270, 360. Booyah. Okay? Now let's look at this one. So this one's kind of tricky because we have a sine squared in there, we have a sine, we have just a constant term. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something called u substitution. So we're going to let u equal sine of theta. So wherever there's a sine of theta, we're going to plug in a u. Okay? So, right there's that sine squared, that's going to become u squared. 3 times sine of theta, that sine of theta becomes u. Then minus 4 equals 0. So that's u squared plus 3u minus 4 equals 0. Then we can just solve this by factoring, and you can use the x to factor this, or you could do it whatever way you do it. I'm just going to use the x. So the top number is negative 4, bottom number is 3. What multiplies to be negative 4 adds to be 3. That's 4 and negative 1. So we get u plus 4 and u minus 1 equals 0. So then you're going to have u plus 4 equals 0, u minus 1 equals 0. So then u equals negative 4 and u equals 1. But we let u equal the sine of theta. So I'm going to plug sine of theta back in for u. You always have to plug it back in. So then sine of theta equals negative 4, sine of theta equals 1. Then we're going to look at the unit circle. Negative 4 is nowhere on this unit circle, so I'm not even going to bother with negative 4. But 1 is on the unit circle, and it's right there. So theta equals 90. Then we're not even going to bother with negative 4 because it's not on the unit circle. You could find it by doing the inverse and stuff, but I'm not too worried about that. Let's just worry about the ones that are actually on the circle. Okay? Now let's look at this one. Again, we're going to use u substitution. So we're going to let u equal the cosine of theta. So that's 4u squared minus 1 equals 0. Now 4u squared is a perfect square. 1 is a perfect square. So we're going to use the difference of squares. And if you don't remember that, this is what it is. So a squared minus b squared equals a plus b and a minus b. So a is 2u because 2u squared is 4u squared. And then b is 1 because 1 squared is 1. Then you just plug that in. So that's 2u plus 1 and 2u minus 1 equals 0. So then we're going to have those separated. So 2u plus 1 equals 0. 2u minus 1 equals 0. Solve for u, so we're going to subtract the 1 or add the 1, divide by 2. So you get u equals negative 1/2 and u equals positive 1/2. But u equals the cosine of theta. So I'm going to plug back in the cosine of theta. So cosine of theta equals negative 1/2. Cosine of theta equals positive 1/2. Look at our unit circle. This is so crucial. If you don't know this, you're going to have to write it on your note card or something because you have to be able to reference the unit circle. That's why I kind of wanted you guys to memorize this. But, okay, let's look and see where this equals negative 1/2 or positive 1/2. Well, that's at 60 degrees, at 120 degrees, at 240 degrees, and 300 degrees. So theta equals 60, 120, 240, and 300. Okay? Now let's look at this one. So again, we're going to use u substitution. Let u equal cosine of theta. So you get 2u squared minus 5u equals 3, which that's 2u squared minus 5u equals 3. I just rewrote that without the parentheses. Now this looks like something we can factor, but we have to set it equal to 0 first. So I'm going to subtract that 3 over. And I get 2u squared minus 5u minus 3 equals 0. And I'm going to use slip and slide. So I'm going to multiply the 2 to the 3. And I get u squared minus 5u minus 6 equals 0. Factor that using the x or whatever you factor that with. So the top number is negative 6, bottom is negative 5. So that's negative 6 and 1. So I get u minus 6 and u plus 1 equals 0. So u minus, oh wait, sorry, I skipped a step. So since we're doing slip and slide, I multiplied first, now I have to divide. So I'm going to divide the 6 by 2 and I'm going to divide the 1 by 2 because that's what I multiplied by. So I get u minus 3 and u plus 1 half equals 0. So I have u minus 3 equals 0, u plus 1 half equals 0. So u equals 3 and u equals negative 1 half. But u equals cosine of theta. So I'm going to plug cosine of theta back in. So you get cosine of theta equals 3. Cosine of theta equals negative 1 half. Look at our unit circle. There are no 3's on there. So cosine will never equal 3 on the unit circle. It can equal 3, just not on the unit circle. But we need to find where it equals negative 1 half. And that happens to be 120 and 240. So theta equals 120 and 240. Okay, and then that one we're just not going to worry about. We're going to cancel it out. Let's look at this one. So these ones we have to solve and we have to give it into degrees, give our solution in degrees. But these aren't very easy to solve yet. So we have to look at our identities and we have to substitute some things in before we can really get going on this. Okay, because we have 4 cosine of 2 theta plus sine squared of theta equals 3. That looks impossible. I don't know what to do with that. So I know that cosine of 2 theta equals cosine squared of theta minus sine squared of theta from what we did last time. So I'm going to plug that in for my cosine of 2 theta. So I have 4 and then cosine squared of theta minus sine squared of theta plus sine squared of theta equals 3. Those signs cancel and you're left with 4 cosine squared of theta equals 3. Divide by 4. And you get cosine squared of theta equals 3/4. Now square root both sides. Whenever you take the square root, sorry, talking's hard right now. Square root, you have to do the plus or minus every single time, okay? So the left side's easy, it just becomes cosine of theta. If you're taking the square root of a fraction, you can put the top under the radical and the bottom. So I have the plus or minus the square root of 3 over the square root of 4. Well, the square root of 4 is 2, so that's the square root of 3 over 2. Then I'm going to go look at my unit circle and see where does cosine equal either positive square root of 3 over 2 or negative square root of 3 over 2. And that is at 30 degrees and 150. You might be like, well, wait, it equals it at 210 and 330 also, but our interval here was just from 0 to 180, so we're just working with the top. That's why you have to check the intervals. Okay, so theta equals 30 degrees and 50 degrees. Let's do another one. So we have cosine tangent minus sine squared of theta equals 0. Well, I don't know what to do with this. So let's start by changing it to sines and cosines, because that seems kind of logical right now. So tangent equals sine over cosine. So I have cosine times sine over cosine minus sine squared of theta. Well, those cosines will cancel, and I'm left with sine of theta minus sine squared of theta equals 0. Now, those both have signs in common, so I can divide a sine out, and you're left with sine of theta, and then 1 minus sine of theta equals 0. So then sine of theta equals 0, 1 minus sine of theta equals 0. Subtract that 1, you get negative sine of theta equals negative 1. So then sine of theta equals 1. We're going to look at our unit circle again, see where it equals 0. That's at 0 and 180. Then it equals 1 at 90 degrees. So theta equals 0, 90, and 180 degrees. Cool? Okay, I think this is the last one. So we have cosine of 2 theta plus cosine of theta equals 0. Well, we can't really do anything there because you can't divide a cosine out because cosine of 2 theta and cosine of theta are not the same thing. They're very different. But I know that cosine of 2 theta equals 2 cosine squared of theta minus 1. And I'm using the 2 cosine squared of theta minus 1 because this right here is cosine. So I don't want to put it in terms of sine because that's not going to help me. I'm just going to get all jumbled at that point. So I'm putting it in terms of cosine. So then that becomes 2 cosine squared of theta minus 1 plus cosine of theta equals 0. I'm just going to rearrange that. So that's 2 cosine squared of theta plus cosine of theta minus 1 equals 0. Let's use u substitution. So let u equal cosine of theta. So that's 2u squared plus u minus 1 equals 0. Slip inside. So that's u squared plus u squared plus u minus 2 equals 0. That factors to u plus 2 and u minus 1. So then we multiplied by 2 to start with. We have to divide by 2. So that's u plus 2 divided by 2 and u plus 1, or minus 1 half. So that's u plus 1 and u minus 1 half. So then I have u plus 1 equals 0, u minus 1 half equals 0. So then u equals negative 1 and u equals 1 half. But we let u equal the cosine of theta, so I have to plug that back in. So I get cosine of theta equals negative 1 and cosine of theta equals 1 half. Use my little chart here, my unit circle. Where does cosine equal negative 1? Well, it equals negative 1 at 180. And where does cosine equal 1 half? That's at 60 degrees. And it's only from 0 to 180, so I'm not even going to look at the bottom. So my answer is 60 degrees and 180 degrees. Cool? We're going to save the rest for class. Remember to take the quiz. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching these videos and for just keeping up. I know it's been kind of a crazy month or so with all of this and we're kind of flying through this, but you guys are awesome and I love you and thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.